I spent the morning peeling sweet potatoes by myself in a quiet kitchen. The smell of cinnamon and brown sugar filled the house, just like it had every Thanksgiving since I was married. But this time, there was no laughter in the living room, no grandchildren running through the hallway, no background noise of a football game echoing off the walls. There was only silence. And the weight of knowing I hadn't been invited. For 38 years, I had hosted Thanksgiving dinner. Rain or shine, divorce or illness, even the year my husband died, I still cooked. My son Ethan used to help set the table when he was little. He'd sneak a spoonful of cranberry sauce before dinner and swear he was just checking the temperature. That memory used to make me smile. This year, it made my stomach turn. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. They didn't invite me, not to dinner, not to anything. 3 days before Thanksgiving, I called Ethan to ask what time I should arrive. I already knew something was wrong. I hadn't heard a word from them all month. And when I asked about plans the week before, he'd said, "We're still figuring it out." This time, his voice was clipped, distant. "Actually, Mom, we're doing something small this year, just our family." I remember pausing. "Just our family," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "You know what I mean?" he said quickly. "Me, Jen, the kids. It's just been a long year. We need some time for ourselves." I didn't say anything for a moment. I couldn't. He went on, like I was an inconvenience he needed to get off the phone. "Maybe we can do something in December." Jen was thinking of a little pre-Christmas brunch or something. A brunch. After 38 Thanksgivings, I said, "Okay," and hung up. I don't even remember the rest of that night, but the next morning, out of habitude maybe, denial I started prepping the same way I always did. I baked my grandmother's cornbread. I set out the good dishes. I made stuffing from scratch. I told myself maybe they'd change their mind. Maybe they'd drop by. But they DI'd in single quotes. To not a call. Not a text. Thanksgiving Day, I sat down alone. At a table for 8, I even lit the candles. I stared at my reflection in the silverware and thought about every ride I gave. Every babysitting hour, every holiday gift I bought when they didn't have the money. Every time I told Ethan's kids that Mommy and Daddy are just busy, when the truth was that they were too selfish to care. I thought about the $15,000 I loaned them when Jen's business was failing. They never paid me back. They didn't even bring it up. And now I wasn't even worth a chair at the table by the second glass of wine. I stopped trying to hold the tears. I felt like I'd been erased, not just from a holiday, but from my own family. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years, opened my financial records. I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I just wanted to understand, to remind myself that I existed, that I mattered. I logged into my bank accounts, opened the folders I long stopped checking because Ethan handles that stuff now, and started reading. At first, nothing looked too unusual, a few standard withdrawals here and there. But then I opened the savings account I had created for emergencies, a private account Ethan didn't know, still had access to. And that's when my hands started to shake. There were transfers I hadn't authorized, several over the last year, some small $300 here, $500 there, but others were larger. $2,000 on July 15th, $4,500 on September 3rd, all labeled EJ Transfer. In the description line, I hadn't approved any of it. EJ, Ethan, and Jen. I'd checked. The joint account we had opened years ago when I still trusted them with small errands and grocery runs. That one was nearly empty. Drained. I felt sick. I thought back to every time Ethan had called me over the last year. Every just until next week or we're in a bit of a bind. I had always said yes, always, because I loved them. But this wasn't help. This was theft. And they knew I wouldn't fight them. They knew I wouldn't say no because I was their mother. and they thought I'd always be available. The next morning, I called the bank and froze the accounts. I didn't tell them. I didn't yell, didn't cry. I just started protecting myself. And as I sat in the quiet, a strange calm settled over me. Like I had finally stopped drowning. Like I had just begun to breathe again. I had given them everything, every last part of me. My time, my money, my history. And in return, they gave me absence. So now I would give them silence. I looked around the house at the furniture I bought, the mortgage I had paid off, the title of the home that was still in my name because I had added them to the deed just in case, but never removed myself completely. That house they lived in was still mine. I had let them stay there because they promised to take care of it, because they said it would be easier for the kids, because I thought it would keep us close. Instead, it gave them control. That night, I made another call, this time to my lawyer. And for the first time in my life, I didn't apologize for asking to take back what was mine, not out of revenge, but out of survival. The Monday after Thanksgiving, I expected a call. Not because I thought Ethan would apologize. He hasn't done that in years, but because I assumed he'd realize the accounts were frozen and start asking questions. But there was nothing. Not a single message. Not from Ethan, not from Jen, not even one of the kids asking to come over like they usually did. When Jen wanted a break, 3 full days passed in silence. I kept waiting, checking the screen every few hours like a fool. The last message I had from Ethan was a grocery list he texted me. 2 weeks ago, milk, chicken thighs, diapers, all things I paid for, by Thursday. I stopped checking instead. I cleaned. I went into the spare room I'd turned into a playroom for the grandkids. Ethan's kids and packed up the toys they never played with. Most of them I'd bought. Half still had the tags. I boxed up the books, folded the blankets, and stripped the sheets from the little pull-out couch I had put there just in case they stayed over. They never did. I didn't cry while I did it. I thought I would, but I didn't. I felt hollow. Not empty, just done. I stacked everything in neat piles by the door and called a local shelter. They sent a truck the next day. A quiet young man and a middle-aged woman came to pick everything up. She asked if I was sure I wanted to donate. All of it, I'm sure. I said. They thanked me and drove off. That night, sat on the couch and stared at the wall where the grandkids' drawings used to hang. Jen had asked for them back 2 years ago, said she wanted to frame them properly. I never saw them again. It wasn't about the paper. It was the way they slowly took pieces of me and made me feel like it was normal. And I let them my lawyer. Amanda called Friday morning. She'd reviewed the documents and confirmed that, yes, legally, the house was still in my name. I had added Ethan to the deed after his second child was born, thinking it would help them qualify for refinancing if they ever needed it. But I never signed over the full title. Do you want to proceed with the eviction? She asked gently. Hearing the words shook me a little. Eviction? My own son. His wife? My grandchildren. Let's start with the notice, I said. Wanted to be clear. I'm not playing games. Okay, Amanda said. We'll draft a formal notice to vacate and deliver it through the proper channels. They'll have 30 days. 30 days. 1 month. Enough time for them to realize what they'd done. Maybe even apologize. But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. That same afternoon, I took a trip to the storage unit I had rented 5 years earlier when I downsized after my husband passed. I still had boxes of old paperwork there, including copies of financial records, deeds, and tax files. I brought them home and spread them across the dining table for hours. I read every check I had written for Ethan over the years. Every time. I'd covered their rent before they moved into my house. It's the receipts for the down payment on Jen's car. It's the credit card statements with airline charges, none of which were mine. I wasn't looking for ammunition. I was looking for clarity, for proof I wasn't crazy. And there it was. Page after page, year after year, $81,460. That was the rough total, not including groceries. Not including babysitting or school fees I'd paid just once to help them out. That number was just what I could track from checks and direct deposits. $81,460. That night, I opened a notebook and wrote down one sentence at the top of the first page. This is the price of being silent. And then I started listing everything. Every sacrifice. Every time I didn't speak up. Every moment I allowed them to walk over me because I thought that's what love meant. The next morning, the phone finally rang. It was Ethan. I didn't answer right away. I let it go to voicemail. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. He left a message. Mom hates Ethan. A weird thing, I think there's something going on with the accounts. My debit card didn't work yesterday and Jen couldn't. Use the joint one either. Can you call me back? That was it. Not a word about Thanksgiving. Not a word about leaving me out. Just money. I waited 5 minutes and then called him back. He answered on the second ring. Hey, Mom. Thank God. Did something happen with the bank accounts? Yes, I said plainly. I froze them. There was silence. Then a forced laugh. What? Why? Because I reviewed the statements, Ethan, and I saw the transfers. I saw how much has been taken without my permission. Mom, wait. Were just you used money I set aside for emergencies. Without asking. That wasn't help, Ethan. That was theft. Don't say that. His voice sharpened. It wasn't like that. You always said we were family? You always said we'd figure things out together. And what did you say when you left me alone on Thanksgiving? He went quiet. I kept going. You could have told me you didn't want me there, but you didn't. You lied. And then I find out you've been helping yourselves to my money behind my back, and I'm just supposed to let it go? It's not like we were buying yachts or anything, he muttered. We needed it. Jen's hours got cut. The kids needed clothes. I almost laughed. You took $4,500 in one day, Ethan. That's not for clothes. He had no response. I'm not your bank, I said, my voice steady, and I'm not your backup plan anymore. What does that mean? Kate means, I said slowly, you have 30 days to move out of the house. There was a beat of pure silence. Then, are you serious? I'm very serious. You're kicking your own son out? No. I'm taking back what's mine. You had years to build something. You chose to live off me instead. That's not my fault. He started to yell, but I hung up. I stood there for a long time after. The phone still in my hand, and I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. I felt lighter because I wasn't punishing him. I was finally choosing myself. The day after I told Ethan he had 30 days to move out. The silence returned. I didn't hear from him, not for 24 hours. Not a word from Jen either. It was a strange kind of quiet. Not peaceful, but tense. It's like a rubber band stretched and waiting to snap. On the second day, my phone rang again. This time it was Jen. I didn't answer. She left a message. Hi, Linda. We got your notice. Look, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Ethan said you were upset, and I get that. But we can talk about this like adults, right? Let's sit down. The kids don't need to be in the middle of all this. I listened to the message twice. Then I deleted it. There had been plenty of time for talking. Talking didn't happen on Thanksgiving. Talking didn't happen before they drained the accounts. Talking didn't happen when I sat alone at a table for 8. Now that they were losing something, suddenly they wanted to talk. By the end of that week, the formal notice of eviction had been delivered to the house. Amanda made sure it was done properly, certified mail, printed copies. Delivery confirmation. They couldn't claim they didn't know. On Monday morning, Ethan showed up at my door. I hadn't seen him in person since October. He didn't look like the boy I raised anymore. His hair was messy, and he had that forced casual look like someone pretending they weren't nervous. But he was nervous. I saw it in the way his hands wouldn't stay still. Can I come in? He asked. No, I said, standing in the doorway. Say what you need to say here. He looked surprised. He kept looking past me, like maybe the version of me he remembered would suddenly appear and say, "Of course, honey. Come in. Let's talk." But that version of me was gone. "Mom, this isn't you," he said finally. "This whole lawyer thing, eviction notices, it's too much. You're really going to make your grandchildren homeless over a few withdrawals." I almost laughed. "Is that what you think this is about? A few withdrawals?" He opened his mouth, then closed it. I stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind. "Me, Ethan?" I said calmly. "This isn't about a few withdrawals. This is about years of disrespect. Years of using me when it was convenient, of taking my money, my time, and my kindness, and giving me nothing back." He shook his head. "That's not true. We're family. We've always helped each other." I said sharply, "I helped. You took." He looked wounded, but I didn't flinch. "I let you live in my home. I let you take over the bills while I took care of everything else. I gave you access to my accounts. You drained them. I didn't even think I'd notice." "We're going to pay it back," he muttered when I asked. "After the next vacation? After the next tight month. You left me alone on Thanksgiving, Ethan, and you used my own money to do it." That part made him blink. He didn't deny it. He just said, "It wasn't like that." "I know exactly what it was like," I said, "'cause I lived it. While you were posting photos from the cruise, I was sitting at a table alone, with candles, and a full turkey." He looked down. I stepped back toward the door. "You have until December 15th, I said. "After that, I will have the sheriff involved. I'm not bluffing, and I'm not backing down." "Don't do this," he said. "Think about the kids." "I did," I replied. "For the last 10 years. Now I'm thinking about me." Close the door. That night, Jen texted me a long message about how hurtful I was being. She said I was punishing the whole family and acting irrational, that I was letting money ruin relationships. Didn't answer, too. Hours later, another message came from her. "This is the definition of elder abuse. Linda, you're going to regret this." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I blocked her number. I didn't need threats disguised as concern. I forwarded the messages to Amanda. She responded within the hour. "Let me know if they escalate." "You've done everything by the book." I slept better that night than I had in weeks. 10 days passed without a word. I didn't ask anyone for updates. I didn't drive by the house. I didn't check their social media. I let the process play out. On the 11th day, Amanda called. They filed a response. She said, "They're trying to claim that you gifted them the property, that you added Ethan to the deed as a full transfer, not partial." My stomach dropped, but only for a second. "I have the original documents," I said. "I figured you did." "I've already filed a reply. They don't have a leg to stand on. But be prepared, they're angry." "I know," I said. "That's why I started locking my door." 3 more days passed. On a cold Thursday morning, I drove by the house. Didn't stop. I just passed slowly. I saw the lights on, toys still scattered across the lawn. Jen's car was parked in the driveway. Ethan's truck was missing its front bumper. Again, nothing had changed, and that told me everything I needed to know. They were still waiting for me. Back down. They thought I'd cave. They didn't believe I'd go through with it, but I was. Done waiting to be believed. 2 weeks before Christmas, I got a call from Amanda again. "They've agreed to vacate voluntarily," she said. "We'll sign the documents tomorrow. I suggest you change the locks immediately after." I hung up and sat in silence for a moment. They were leaving. It was over. That Sunday, I drove by again. The yard was quiet. The cars were gone. A for rent sign had been planted on the lawn, and the front door was left cracked open. I parked across the street and walked up slowly. I wasn't sure what I expected, but when I stepped inside, I understood. They hadn't just left. They'd abandoned it. The floors were scratched, a hole punched in one of the walls. The fridge was wide open, cabinets emptied. There were juice stains on the carpet and crayon on the hallway wall. They hadn't even taken everything, just what they could carry quickly. I stood in the middle of the living room and looked around. This was the house I built. Not with money, not with love. And they treated it like trash. I didn't cry. Not there. Not then. I called a locksmith, then a cleaner, and then I did something I didn't expect. I sat on the floor of the empty living room and called a realtor. It's time to sell. I said. The next morning, the locksmith arrived right on time. A quiet man in his 50s, dressed in a gray work jacket, toolbox in hand. I stood on the porch, arms crossed, watching as he inspected the damaged locks. They really didn't take care of this place, he muttered, shaking his head. No, I said. They didn't. He spent the next 2 hours replacing every lock front, back, garage, and even the side door that Ethan once told me didn't matter. I had always meant to fix that one, just never got around to it. When he was finished, I took the new keys and slipped them onto my own keychain. For a moment, I stood there looking at the front door. That house had once been filled with noise, chaos, holidays, scraped knees, birthday cakes, late-night phone calls. I used to imagine growing old with the comfort of knowing my grandchildren would always be nearby now. It was just a building again. 4 walls and a roof. It's a place that held more disappointment than joy. I called the realtor, Susan, and we set a meeting for the following afternoon. She was kind and professional, the kind of woman who didn't waste time with small talk. I'll bring the paperwork. We'll list it this week if you're sure, she said. I'm sure, I replied. The next day, Susan met me at the house. She wore a navy blazer and carried a clipboard. As we walked through the rooms, she made quiet notes, occasionally glancing over at me. They didn't leave it in the best condition, she said gently. I didn't expect them to, I answered. I can get a cleaning crew in before the photos. Maybe some touch-up paint too. Do whatever it takes, I said. I just want it gone. She nodded, not asking any more questions. I appreciated that. That night, I sat in my own kitchen with the keys on the table in front of me. I stared at them for a long time. They looked like any ordinary keys, but they felt heavy. Heavier than I expected. I wasn't sad. I wasn't relieved either. I just felt done. 2 days later, Susan sent me the photos. The cleaners had done a good job. The house looked better than I thought it would. She listed it that same evening. It went live on 3 real estate sites. By morning, I didn't think Ethan or Jen even knew it was listed. But that changed fast by the weekend. Jen sent me a message from a new number she'd been blocked on the old one. So you're just going to erase us now. The message read, selling the house behind our backs like we never mattered. I didn't reply. The next message came an hour later. Don't think we won't fight this. You'll regret what you're doing. I forwarded both to Amanda. She called me within an hour. They can threaten, but they have no legal grounds anymore. Let them bark. They're just mad they didn't get the last word. That weekend, the house had 3 showings. By Monday, 2 offers came in. One was a young couple expecting their first child. The other was a retired school teacher looking to downsize. I chose the teacher, not for any strategic reason, just because she reminded me of who I used to be, someone who wanted a quiet home and a fresh start. The papers moved quickly after that. Ethan must have found out through someone else. Because on Wednesday evening, he showed up at my door again. This time, I didn't answer. He knocked for a while, then finally left. The next morning, I found a note wedged in the screen door. You never even gave us a chance. You chose money over family. You'll be alone when it matters most. Just remember that. I read it twice, folded it in half, and dropped it in the trash. Maybe 3 years ago, a note like that would have gutted me now. It just proved I'd made the right decision, because it was never about the house. It was never about the money. It was about respect. Okay? And I had begged for it long enough. By the end of the month, the sale was complete. The funds were wired directly to my account. I didn't celebrate. I didn't even tell anyone. I just sat in my living room and stared out the window. Watching the neighborhood kids ride their bikes up and down the sidewalk, I could finally breathe. Later, that evening, I pulled out my old notebook again, the one where I'd written, "This is the price of being silent." On a fresh page, I wrote, "This is the reward for finally speaking up." A week after the sale, I got a call from a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick it up. It was Ethan. His voice was flat, so it's done then. "Yes," I said. A long pause. "We're staying with Jen's cousin now," he added. "It's cramped, not great." I didn't say anything. He cleared his throat. "I guess I didn't think you'd actually go through with it." "I know," I said. "That's the problem." Silence again. "I don't know how we're supposed to come back from this," he said finally. "That's up to you," I replied, "but I'm not going back to how things were." He didn't argue. He didn't apologize either. He just hung up. That was the last time I heard his voice. It's strange what you miss. I don't miss the tension. I don't miss the lies. But sometimes I miss the version of him that used to call just to say hi. The boy who helped me stir cake batter, who used to hold my hand during thunderstorms. That boy is gone. And the man? I don't owe him anything. 2 weeks after the house sold, Christmas lights started popping up all over the neighborhood. I didn't put any up that year. I didn't even bother unpacking the small tree I kept in the garage. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't preparing for company. No baking trays, no extra groceries, no guest towels laid out in the hallway. And I didn't miss it. I thought maybe that would make me feel guilty. It didn't. On Christmas Eve, I had soup and toast. I watched an old movie on TV, then turned my phone off before going to bed. I didn't check for messages the next morning. It was only the day after Christmas, when I turned my phone back on, that I saw the missed calls. 6. In total. 2 from Ethan, 4 from a number I didn't recognize. A few hours later, I got a voicemail. It was Jen's mother. I hadn't spoken to her in years. Linda. Her voice said, almost theatrical, "I don't know what exactly is going on between you and the kids, but I think it's time someone talks some sense into you. Family is not disposable. You're hurting everyone. You've made your point. It's time to forgive and move on." I deleted it before it finished. The next day, a new message came in from Ethan's old high school friend, Marcus. I hadn't seen him since Ethan's wedding. "Hi, Linda. I don't mean to overstep, but Ethan mentioned you're not speaking. He's been under a lot of pressure. If there's anything I can do to help fix things, let me know. Holidays aren't the same without family." I didn't answer that one either. That week, the phone kept ringing. Aunt Carol, my cousin Rachel, even a neighbor I barely knew, asking if everything was okay and that she hoped to see the kids over again soon. It was obvious Ethan was talking to people. Not to me, but about me. He was painting his version of the story, and he was getting sympathy. But I didn't care about being liked anymore. I had spent years doing what made other people comfortable, playing the understanding mom, letting things slide, avoiding confrontation. And where had that gotten me? Lone, disrespected, financially drained. Let them gossip. Let them whisper about how cold I had become. They hadn't seen the bank statements. They hadn't sat alone on Thanksgiving. They hadn't opened the door to a house they owned and found nothing but damage and disrespect. But I had, and I remembered all of it. Still, I couldn't help but feel a flicker of something bitter growing inside me. Not sadness, not anger, something closer to exhaustion. I was tired of being the one who had to take the high road. I was tired of being the one expected to be the bigger person. What about Ethan? What about Jen? When was anyone going to ask them why they thought it was okay to steal from me? Why they thought I didn't deserve a seat at my own family table? That question never came. What came instead was another letter, this time in an envelope. Hand-delivered. It wasn't from Ethan, it was from Jen, written in her handwriting. Folded neatly. I opened it while standing at my kitchen counter. "Linda, I'm writing this because I feel like texting hasn't worked. And Ethan is too emotional to handle this maturely. I know things got tense. Mistakes were made. But this doesn't have to be permanent. The kids miss you. We all do. I know you were upset about the money. I get it. But we always assumed it was okay because you never said otherwise. We thought you were helping because you wanted to. And as for Thanksgiving, yes, it was wrong not to invite you. I told Ethan that. He made that decision, and I regret not standing up to him. But this, cutting us off, selling the house, it feels like punishment. Maybe you think you're protecting yourself, but all you're doing is breaking what's left of this family. We need to rebuild. You're the matriarch. You should lead with grace, not resentment. Please think about that. Jen, I read it twice. I placed the paper on the table. Then I sat down, looked out the window, and let the words settle. We thought you were helping because you wanted to, as if my silence had been consent, as if my years of quiet endurance meant they had permission to keep taking. You should lead with grace. They wanted grace now. Now that they were uncomfortable. Now that they were inconvenienced. Where was that grace when they locked me out of their lives? Where was it when they emptied my account? I didn't respond to Jen's letter. Instead, I wrote a short one of my own. Jen, I did want to help. That's why I stayed quiet for so long. But what you call punishment, I call boundaries. And what you call breaking the family, I call waking up. I won't be returning to how things were. I won't be manipulated into pretending I wasn't hurt. I deserve peace. I deserve respect. And I intend to keep both. Linda didn't mail it. I didn't text a picture of it. I just folded it and kept it in my drawer. For me, a few days later, got a checkup at my doctor's office. She said my blood pressure had dropped by 15 points since my last visit. I told her nothing had changed, except that I'd stopped letting people walk over me. She smiled. That'll do it. That weekend, I went to a craft fair by myself. I bought a hand-stitched quilt, ate a hot dog from a food truck, and spent nearly an hour watching a group of teenagers perform folk music under a tent. I didn't think about Ethan or Jen or what they were doing. I just sat on a bench and watched, and for the first time in a long time, felt like myself. A few days after the craft fair, got a letter from the utility company addressed to me, but for the old property. I had forgotten to finalize the name change when the house was sold. It was a simple oversight, but the kind that used to keep me up at night now. I just drove to the office the next morning, signed the release papers, and walked out without. Even looking back, that house wasn't mine anymore. Not the mortgage, not the responsibility, not the memories that used to pull at me every time I saw the driveway. The new owner had already started painting the shutters. Yellow dot, it didn't match the old brick. But that wasn't my concern anymore. On my way back, I stopped at a small diner I used to go to with my husband. I hadn't been there since he passed. But it was still exactly the same booths, same older woman at the counter, same weak coffee that somehow still felt comforting. I sat by the window and ordered breakfast. Just me, no rush, no guilt. Halfway through my eggs, my phone buzzed on the table. Ethan again. This time I answered. I wasn't sure why. Maybe because I was finally ready. Maybe because I knew nothing he could say would shake me anymore. Hello? I said. Hey, he replied. His voice was quiet, different. I heard the house sold. It did, I said, cutting a piece of toast. A pause. I wanted to ask you something. I didn't respond. I let him continue. We're trying to get back on our feet. It's been hard. Jen's cousin can't let us stay much longer. And we're trying to find a rental. But with the credit situation and the kids, it's been tough. I knew where this was going. I'm not calling to ask for money, he added quickly. I know that's not an option. He sighed. I just wanted to know if maybe sometime we could talk. In person, not about anything specific. Just talk. I put my fork down. Ethan, I said calmly, I need to ask you something first, okay? If I hadn't cut you off, if I hadn't taken legal action, frozen the accounts, sold the house, would you have ever apologized? There was a long pause. No, he said finally. Probably not. Thank you for being honest. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, he added. I didn't think you'd actually do any of it. I know, I said. I don't blame you, he said. I'm not doing this to punish you, Ethan. I was surviving. You were suffocating me slowly, and I kept letting it happen. And I can't go back to that. I get it, he said. I do. I'm glad, I replied, because the door you're asking me to open again, it doesn't lead to the same house anymore. I've changed. My life has changed. He didn't argue. We ended the call there, polite, civil, but unfinished. And I think that was the right way to leave it. That night, I poured myself a glass of wine and walked out to the small back patio. It wasn't much, just a few chairs, some old potted plants, but it was mine. I sat under the porch light and listened to the stillness. For the first time in years, no one needed anything from me. No one was texting, asking for help. No one was using my kindness like a debit card. It was quiet, but it wasn't lonely that winter. I started doing things I had long postponed. I signed up for a community ceramics class. I joined a morning walking group at the local park. Coffee with a neighbor who always waved, but we never talked. People started calling me Linda, again, not Grandma, not Mom, not the one who always pays, just Linda. One afternoon in early February, I received a letter. It was handwritten, but the envelope had no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was from Ethan. There was no apology inside, no request for help. It's just a few lines. I know I've hurt you. I'm not asking for anything. Just wanted to say, I understand why you did what you did. Maybe, one day, we can talk again. Ethan and I folded the note and placed it in the same drawer where I kept the letter. I wrote to Jen not because I planned to respond, but because I had made peace with what it was. He wasn't who I needed him to be, and I was no longer pretending to be who they expected either. Months passed. Easter came and went. The phone rang less. The messages stopped altogether, and the silence. It stayed, but now it felt like peace.